Hello and welcome to the Roundtable Podcast. I am Shogun. Thank you to the live audience and to our recorders. Today is going to be a very exciting and interesting event about the Book of Enoch, which is actually a super interesting topic that's been recommended several times. Before we start, join us please on the Roundtable Discord server. You can find us through Discord, through the politics or conspiracy theories links, or just Google Roundtable Discord server. Find us on social media, Instagram, Facebook, etc. on the roundtable.com, roundtablediscord.com server, whatever, all that website. So thank you very much. And today we have, I guess as a special guest, we have Doug and also other members here who might comment on this. But basically, as a general introduction, there was a book called the Book of Enoch that was actually at one time generally considered part of the Bible. And in the Ethiopian canon, it is still part of the Bible. And the Ethiopian canon is probably one of the most legitimate traditions in Christianity. So, by all accounts, it really should be part of the Bible. And it's a very psychedelic thing about angels and fallen angels and hybrids and demons and journeys into space. And there was also a system of magic called Enochian magic, which was developed by the original 007, Edward Kelly and John D. John D being the 007. So anyways, that's just a whatever. But Doug, help me out here. Give us an introduction into this topic.
So to start off, Enoch was somebody who was basically in the beginning, and it said that he walked with God for 300 years and God took him into heaven. So this is historically the first account of somebody being taken from the earth and added into heaven. Specifically talking about Enoch 1, it gives an account of very early history in Genesis along with several prophecies. It deals with the explicit reason why there was a worldwide flood. Every world mythology has a world flood story, and every mythology does more or less sum it up as men being wicked, but that wickedness isn't expressed, at least in the detail it is in the Book of Enoch. Early Jewish tradition there's some early Jewish traditions that put Enoch a little higher than the Torah, because Enoch deals almost exclusively with heaven. This is also a book that gives a large support for the flat earth model, and I'll just dive into the story. So basically it starts off with a conspiracy of 200-ish angels who are lusting after women. The leader of it, they know it's a sin against God, but the leader of it, he fears bearing the punishment of this great sin, so they come together and they make a pact in order to do this sin against God, and they go off and they have a bunch of lusty fun. And they teach very certain things. They teach the making of weapons, the making of jewelry, the beautifying of eyes, or putting makeup on the eyes. They teach about precious stones. They teach about dyes, and the world becomes changed. There's impiety and fornication. Another one taught spells and to cut roots. One taught astrologers, and another taught the path of the moon. And as they were teaching this to men, it started destroying the earth. And the earth started, the whole earth started laying accusation against God. But things endured. And the children of these fallen angels and giants, the children of these fallen angels and women were giants. And when the earth could no longer support them, the giants turned on the earth and started consuming anything, and the blood of the earth cried out. And God decreed that all these giants would kill each other in a battle, and their parents would have to watch, which is why these fallen angels are also called the Watchers. Book of Enoch also places these disembodied Nephilim spirits, because spirits are eternal, but these spirits were never meant to be the union between the union between angel and a human being was never meant to happen, and it is abomination. So there wasn't an answer for these Nephilim spirits, so they're more or less either trapped on Earth or they're trapped in Hades, depending on each particular spirit. And this is the origin of demons in Jewish and Christian theology. There's also parallels with the stories of Scientology and parallels in basically a lot of our pop culture today. Like, if you're familiar with the story of Thanos, or I guess his species of people in the Marvel universe, it's a similar thing. Beings from the stars came down and they mingled with humans, and they produced these half alien, half human hybrids, and they put them on this moon in Saturn in Marvel, in the Marvel comics. So when you really pay attention to this idea of something coming from the stars and coming down to Earth and mingling with women to produce some kind of superhuman, it's probably a basis for a lot of like our most popular stories of this day. That would be the question.
Thank you. That was excellent. So, again, my understanding, there's this book, the Book of Enoch. It goes into detail about something that when I was a Christian reading the Bible as a child, etc., I found fascinating, which is just these few verses in the Bible, which says, and the sons of God, or those who from heaven to earth came, found the daughters of men fair, meaning they found female women attractive, and they went into them and bore them sons, meaning had sex with them or impregnated them, and they had children. And these were called the Nephilim, the mighty men, the men of renown. So what it's telling you is some beings, either gods or aliens, came down to earth, had sex with women, or artificially inseminated them, created hybrid beings that then became kings, pharaohs, warlords, mighty men, men of renown, men of fame. So what it means is these hybrids rose to power and prominence. And so this one or two verses in the Bible is telling you that some kind of alien hybridization or demigod project happened. And this is fascinating. But the Book of Enoch elaborates on this. It tells you who came down, Semyaza and his lieutenants, and what they did and what they taught. It's fascinating. And then Enoch goes up to heaven, and it's like this DMT trip. It's very, very psychedelic. So the point is, go ahead.
To build on that, Genesis is 2,400 years of history wrapped up in 50 chapters. There's elaboration of it in places that you wouldn't expect to look, or most people wouldn't find validating. What was I gonna? I guess that's it.
So the tie-in to this also is Enochian magic, which comes through Edward Kelly and John Dee, and was the belief that you could do some kind of occult process to interact with these angels. But even before this, like the whole story of who these beings were, etc., it really is interesting. And what it tells us is an ancient aliens type theory where humans had a simpler way of life. And these beings, see, they're called those who gave up their station, their appointed station. They're called those who from heaven to earth came, the fallen, the watchers, Nephilim and Rephaim. Like, it implies either they were supposed to watch, but they chose to get involved, or they left their appointed station, or they're those who from heaven to earth came, the fallen ones, the fallen angels. They interfered with human genetics and human biology, and they taught us things we weren't supposed to know, which is kind of interesting because it even says like makeup, like women putting eyeshadow on and red lipstick was like an art taught by these beings who from heaven to earth came. So it's saying these ones who left their appointed station, these traitorous watchers who came down to do this, taught women how to put on makeup. It's very weird, and it has a ring to it that makes me think it has truth to it because it's so strange.
So, when God was actually dealing with these angels, he makes an interesting note about mysteries. Azazel being a leader, well, first, there was a petition. Azazel went to Enoch and asked Enoch to intercede to God before him. And when Enoch went, because the angels were trying to repent, so when Enoch went, God told Enoch, he's like, you go back, you tell him no. You guys are basically screwed. You know better. You were created in my glory, where man wasn't made in indirectly in front of God, at least post fall. So they don't Enoch himself, Seth, like these guys weren't born like into the glory of God the way the angels are. It's like, you guys know better. You guys are in my glory, and he says that Azazel traded a useless mystery, the mystery of warfare, for the mystery of marriage, which was not meant for him, or not meant for angels, and the breath of heaven had not been revealed to you yet. So, probably one of the most interesting things I found about this in itself is the idea that there are things in heaven that, or the majority of heaven hasn't even been revealed to the angels yet. And then it goes on further to deal with their punishment. It puts them in a place that isn't described in any kind of Hebrew or Jewish tradition. There's two major speculations to where these fallen angels are currently imprisoned, and there's also a time frame of how long they're imprisoned. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I do believe, like, actually right around the Roswell incident is when I believe that the jail sentence has been up, because it was something like over 4,000 years they were supposed to be in prison, and they're either in prison in Antarctica, which would be the ice barrier, or they're imprisoned in what the Greek we would call Tartarus, or the abyss, which is, to Homer's tradition in the Iliad, Tartarus is as far below Hades as Earth is below heaven. So there's like a whole subset of underworld beneath the underworld in this kind of conception.
Can I say something?
Go ahead, Holy Sepulchre.
Well, I know about the hell that a lot of people don't know is on Earth and it's on the moon. We've been taken over by a evil race. It was a war. The last war that happened was outside of our galaxy. They came past the sun, toward, all the way to Jupiter. They took over all the planets except Saturn and beyond that part. And they mess with our DNA, and they have the Tower of Babel talks about they changed the language of their because they were building a tower that could reach heaven. Well, that could be a spaceship. We could be building a spaceship to reach heaven. Same thing. That's the interpretation of that. But when they said they changed their language, that means they changed their consciousness. And then when they said we're gonna make you die younger, they messed with our DNA so we would die younger too. So a lot of that stuff is what happened. There's been many wars before that war of this planet, and I have evidence of these stone giants all the way from California, Highway 8, Highway 10, and Highway 20, all the way to Texas. You could see these dead giants laying. All them mountains and stuff are dead giants. I mean, they're huge. But that was like during the dinosaur age. That was another war where they completely destroyed this planet with either and the only thing you got to do is take meteorites with spaceships and have solar cells and then just slam them into the planet, whatever. You got the petrified forest right there. I saw the dinosaurs' feces turn into stone.
Let's try to keep it on topic, Holy Sepulchre.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is the technology of this planet is they put us in zero civilization, where they took all knowledge of spaceships, whatever knowledge, and they started all over once they won the war. That's what happened.
So I forgot now what we were originally talking about, but that was interesting,
Well,
but I don't remember even the original idea anymore.
Um, I'll bring it back in. I want to address a certain point about the Tower of Babel. So in order to I guess interpret the Tower of Babel story, you would have to do it to the rest of the standard you're using. The thing with the Tower of Babel is it was a tower built based on the idea of height, and in biblical cosmology, you have this idea of a disc-shaped Earth with a dome on top of it. The idea of the Tower of Babel is that they were trying to build something, because Babel is actually, it literally means like gate into heaven. They were trying to build something in order to reach and pierce the firmament. And then in the script, in the Bible, it says that God confused the languages because they were able to accomplish all that they imagined in their hearts. And the book of Joshua explains that in their hearts, they wanted to wage war in heaven, kill God, and put their own gods up on the throne. So this was a spiritual rebellion against the God, and the languages were confused in light of that. There's speculation on that, like how Nimrod was a mixture of fallen angel DNA with man. That one of the sons of Noah had actually recovered some of the Enochian practices, and because he kept it in his lineage, Nimrod got a hold of it, because Nimrod was one of the sons of Noah, or grandsons of Noah, or down that lineage, and he experimented with it and had the result. And there's multiple rebellions in heaven. Like this rebellion in the Book of Enoch is done with 200 angels, but when you start learning about heaven, you learn that there's literally millions, countless angels. So Satan's rebellion itself is a third of the angels. This is a separate, smaller rebellion of 200, and the Tower of Babel would probably be another. It was another spiritual rebellion done by probably a satanic sect.
Hey, Doug, would there be a modern breaking of the firmament, metaphorically speaking? And what would that be? How would that be externalized in this society?
So I actually I can't answer that in a metaphorical way, because I believe in a literal dome over the earth. Can you repeat your question one more time?
I'm just wondering if there's like a modern day way that we're trying to break through the firmament. Even if the firmament isn't literal, maybe we're trying to break into, I'm just going to be really broad with this, like a hyperdimensional place where maybe some of these disembodied spirits are currently held enslaved. And if, something like, let's say a CERN, Bevos, Switzerland CERN Hadron Collider, I don't know if we're trying to break through something on this earth that where these individuals in the Tartarus enslavement, I don't know if there's an enslavement that's like maybe like a hypercube, or somewhere in the earth where they're being enslaved and held, that we're trying to break into. I don't know if somebody can enlighten or expand on that.
So I'm gonna be half anecdotal and half historic and factual about this at the same time. So just to make a couple of reference points, every single world mythology talks about the idea of these tunnels going into the underworld. Odysseus went into he took a river into Hades, and he literally walked the realm of the dead. Dante in the Divine Comedy did the same thing. I can't name it anymore off the top of my head, but this theme of people finding a cave that goes into the underworld where they see the dead imprisoned is really common. There's a speculative story from Russia about how they were drilling, and they put a microphone down there, and they heard the screams of millions of people in a suffering place. But something I want to make a key note of is both in heaven and hell, geological formations are described. Like there are trees and rivers in both heaven and hell. There are mountain ranges. There's basically anything you can find on Earth. Even like weather patterns can be found in both heaven and hell. And hell being a blanket term because in three different traditions, in the Greek tradition, in the Jewish tradition, and in the Egyptian tradition, hell it's a lot like just another Earth, but for the dead, and there's paradises and there's places of torment. Abraham's bosom and Elysium in the Greek are both places of paradise that are technically located underneath the earth. Now, there's a famous Bible passage where it's like, "You're Peter, and on this rock I shall build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail over thee." Catholic mythology aside, if you look at that, if you look at that scripture, it says he was in Caesarea Philippi, and according to the church tradition, he said it in a particular spot in this in front of these two caves, which are near Mount Hammon or something, Mount Armageddon, something along those.
Oh, Mount Hermon, yeah.
Mount Hermon, yeah. So he said it at the base of that mountain where these two, and that is also the place where the fallen angels are said to have come down in early Jewish tradition and early Christian tradition. And the idea is that in these two caves in Canaanite mythology are called mouths or gates into hell. And I have a very sneaking suspicion that if you were to walk into these two caves and go down far enough, you would find gates into Hades. And if you pass these gates, you would literally walk into the realm of the dead. And if you did it at the time of Lazarus's death, you would be able to see the rich man suffering, and you would be able to see Lazarus in Abraham's bosom from entering this cave. So to build on your question about like tearing apart dimensions, the scriptures itself describe reality being able to be rolled up and folded like a scroll. In one of the stories about Jesus, when they after the calming of the storm, they're in the middle of the ocean, but they immediately go to their landing. So like, let's say it was like another 50 from after the storm to the coast. There's another 50 miles. Imagine being able to fold that 50 miles from a higher reality. And then there's also the properties of Jesus being able to disappear in front of people, like he's literally stepping out of the dimension. And this is where I get a little anecdotal. So I had in my first sleep paralysis attack. I was in the middle of a dream, and what had happened was I had this UFO type esque attack, and it basically pinned me down, and it sucked up my dream through a straw. Like my dream took or the image of my dream, it was like 3 or 4 dimensional depending on how you think of it, and it took a liquid form, and like as it was being sucked up through the straw, the rest of my room started being revealed. So it was like I could see like half of my room and half of the dream at the same time. So to answer, you can do things like open portals, like Aleister Crowley and Jack Parsons are reported to have done it. Aleister Crowley opened a portal to another dimension that brought out Lamb. And then Jack Parsons opened a portal that basically caused the Roswell incident. And because he couldn't close it, that's basically more or less how he died, because the spirits that would come in and out of that portal messed with his rocket so much he died in a rocket explosion. The story of the Witch of Endor.
Well, I opened a portal before, and I seen it happen. It was on Fort Myers on the California beach.
Basically, a rift was opened underneath
It was a
in the
Stargate.
ground, and spirits started coming out of the earth. At the crucifixion, like the sky tore like a veil, and it was and one more anecdotal note. I've seen a hole in the sky. It was in the middle of the night. It was 3 a.m. I looked up at a pitch black sky and I saw like a white hole cut out, and it was like a smoky light that wouldn't bleed out. Like, you know how you can see like light take shape through a cathedral window and you see like this beam of light. It was like the same kind of hole or light hole, but the light wouldn't come out. It just kind of swirled up there and then it closed. So there are ways to open portals, and they're little rips in the fabric of reality.
Well, I saw it come from a star. It came from one star and it came down on the beach and it broke through the fog. You know, it was like foggy, like soup. And it came down, and then I saw it to my right. They were coming out of a cliff, like they were meeting each other. But the way it came out the star was like a ladder, like a boat dock. And it was just extending all the way down to where I was. It was like, wow, man. You know, it's going through the fog, you know, and it's like, I got the heck out of there because I didn't know if they were gonna fight or what, you know. But at first I thought it was a coincidence, maybe, but was it because I did the flashlight thing in the sand? I don't know if I activated something. And I did something on the beach one time. It was like a symbol. And I heard the spirits saying, I did 6 stargates. I did, 6 symbols, whatever. And I heard the spirits in the clouds saying, look, there's 6 portals opening up. And I did it by the beach. So when the water washed the symbols I did to open the stargate, I actually was trying to do it on purpose. And it actually worked. But I don't know if it closed or not, but I was hoping the water would wash the symbol away and then it would close, so.
Makes sense.
Is there a core or within society, would you say that there are the people in positions of power who are utilizing or exploiting these forces? I mean, can we expound on that maybe a little bit if somebody has some insight?
Yes, and after this, I wanna take this back to the main subject of Enoch and spiritual occultism around this idea of Enochian stuff. So it principally in the Bible it says that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, rulers of darkness, spiritual wickedness in high places or heavenly places. There, between heaven and earth, there's another realm called the air, which is where like a lot of demonic activity happens. I would have to. You're on the money, but I would have to kind of reverse the vocabulary. It's men are being exploited by these higher spiritual beings, not the other way around. And I'm a hit heavy real quick into the whole music culture and tie it in with a couple other things. So in music culture, what happens is in order to be a producer, mind you, not an artist, but a producer, you have to be an initiated witch. And basically what happens is like when there's a master record, what they do with the master record is on like there are certain holidays or whatever significant calendar dates they have, they summon a principality, which would be like a lord over the demons. And it would either be a very high-end demon or a fallen angel, and they would have that principality send. Oh yeah, that's a whole other thing though. That's like kind of Harry Potter-ish, but it's real though. Sorry, I'm replying to Edgebot's thing. They're doing, and they would command that principality to send all the demons under its command to follow every copy of that record that goes out. So basically, the idea is if you buy a copy of like one of Led Zeppelin's records, who is very, very much into Aleister Crowley, and they very much practice witchcraft. themselves. So if you bought like a Led Zeppelin record or a Beatles record, you would have a demon living rent free in your home. This goes for most major pop culture literature. It goes for the movies. Anything else you could think of. It.
Hey, just for clarification, Doug, when you mean like one of these entities, do we mean like a disembodied spirit, like an angel that has fallen?
So, as far as I'm aware, like a big difference between angels, whether fallen or not fallen, and a demonic spirit would be their ability to materialize in a physical form. Demons are not capable of having a solid physical manifestation. They can appear to you in your vision, but they do not. That's why they do not have a physical form, which is why they always seek embodiments, or they always seek to inhabit someone or something. A fallen angel is capable of materializing into a form, and they can look just like a human body, or they can look just like a man or a woman, or it's speculated that it's some of these UFOs are actually shape-shifting angels, because shape-shifting is a quality angels have. So it's I can't be necessarily clear. The best term for it is a principality. Whether it's a high-end demon or a fallen angel, I'm not entirely sure. And looking at what I'm about to tie into Anunnaki Magic, I have more reason to believe that these are just Nephilim spirits and not fallen angels themselves. And I have a story about fallen angels that comes from a testimony of somebody who engages in active spiritual warfare in a moment. And this is the same, like this idea that principalities following angel or sending demons to follow every single record or a copy of a master record. Like there's the same thing was done over Harry Potter books. Like they took a master copy or like the first edition draft or the printing press or whatever of it, and they sent a principality over it, and they commanded that principality to send demons to follow every copy of every Harry Potter book. Which is why you have like.
Can I say something? I am the only known one that's really fighting against the powers of this demon world, and I was running into a lot of powers and principalities, and I had my machete in my trench coat. You know, I cut a hole where I could carry it, and I went to the bathroom to go take a dump. You know, and I closed my eyelids, and for some reason I closed my eyelids and looked in the toilet, and I saw a red demon hand with these long fingernails going up in that 2-inch hole. I aimed at his hand with my eyes, like laser eyes. I threw him over the stall, and then I closed my eyes again, and his right hand was coming at my head, and I took that machete, wham, I cut his arm off. You know, that is the only physical manifestation that I could explain that. I don't know if anybody else experienced that, but he was collecting people's balls, human balls or something, or pulling spirits out of men when they take a shit, you know?
And that makes perfect sense to me. It makes perfect sense to me.
But that's what, and I've been on the run, dude. I've been on, every 3 days I got to move. I got to throw spirits out of my car. They get in my car. I might park in the parking lot. And I got to get out of my car, aim at the faces that's in the car, and throw them out in the clouds or the stars. I throw them out, you know?
That's good because you don't want them in there with you if you can actually go any further.
They hurt me. They go for my neck. They go for my feet. They go for my arms, my wrist. They're trying to cut my arm and my wrist off and stuff like that, you know? But that's all
pretty
I
wild.
gotta say about fighting. It's more.
That's wild.
Hey,
It's more
holy
about running
sepulcher.
away.
With respects to fighting, other than your machete, do you use other maybe amulets or tools to protect yourself?
Well, I use firecrackers because if
Oils.
to get them out of my car, sometimes I use firecrackers. I throw it down by my feet. I take newspaper. I use fire. I make a torch out of it. And when they're really attacking me bad, and I forgot to do that the other night when the spirit attacked me, I make a torch and I start burning all inside my car. My roof is full of soot. I mean, it's a 2018 car and it looks awful. You know, it's very embarrassing for someone to even see my car inside. You know, but I'm born on the 13th sign, and the spirit world told me to tell y'all that and about my mother, the 27s and all. And I posted something on Twitter on the this site here about my the Open Eye Project. But I use firecracker. Like right now, I carry a blade with me all the time, and I actually bind it. I was trying to get people to bind the saws, my machete with the saw blade on it. I untied it to rebind it again because I had a feeling they had a way of unbinding the saws. So I untied the saw blade and I retied it again, and I put wax on the end of the knot to stop them from using it because they're sawing mankind in half. I actually saw it happen, and then that's when I told a couple people. I told Shogun and some other people about it too. But I can't tie all the saws up. I need help, you know. Because whatever you bind on Earth, it's physically bounded in the spiritual realm. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Now,
as
I don't
on
know if
earth, as so is in heaven, as above, so
yeah,
below.
yeah. Because for Halloween, I went to Spirits and I bought these alien skeletons and I bounded them up. And I saw in the sky, they said, "Hey man, look at all these aliens. The alien demons are bounded up. They're tied up." I tied the bitches up. and, and then I said, "Well, damn, man, I've been watching them saw people for years, like 10 years. See, I just woke up at 13 years ago." And then I said, well, what if I bind this blade saw? What's going to happen? And the next morning, this dude was bitching up there. He says, "Who binded my saws?" He actually said it. He said, "I've been sawing mankind's hands, arms, legs, and heads off, the head. And I can't do my job. That's his job, to saw them up, you know? So that's why I told everybody on, like Twitter, I had a recording saying this is how you do it, and I need help, but what they're doing is they're trying to stop the quantum entanglement. As long as they keep sawing humans, we can't. They want to steal your powers. They're not worried about your soul. The soul is nothing if it don't have powers. You understand? That's what they've been trying to steal. And sometimes I got to say out loud, it says, I say my name and it says, "I have my powers back." I have my powers back like 3 times. You got to do things like in 3s, 6, or 9. Like Nikola Tesla said, if y'all knew the power of 3, 6, 9. So anytime I do something, I try to do it in them numbers.
Doug, is there anything you want to jump to now?
Okay, but I wanted to tell y'all that, okay?
Yeah.
So, I wanted to tie this in with the occult idea of Enochian stuff, and do a quick comparison between this idea of Enochian magic and biblical encounters with angels. So, an Enochian magic developed by John Dee in whatever year, it's its own language. It has a very pretty alphabet. It's kind of like this Greek, more like Greek hieroglyphics, and just very, very like artistic symbols of stuff, but the phonetics of it are very English. So this ties in with the idea of like in Freemasonry, Scientology, any form of witchcraft, you have to learn like a whole bunch of words. Like in order to be a master mason, which is like the third degree, you have to learn and memorize and be able to do over 3,000 words. In Scientology, you spend all your time in a dictionary. And the reason why you do this, and like like in Scientology, they do the dictionary where they learn every word, they learn every synonym for the word, and when they're doing every synonym, if they don't know the synonym, they have to learn that and learn every synonym for that. So the main purpose for learning all these words very well is to, one, do witchcraft, and two, to learn to say the words backwards, which is a principal thing. So, but basically the idea in Anunnaki Magic is once you get a good grasp on the letters, the language, and the symbols, you basically have to recite, which is this spell, which is one word, and it could go on anywhere between 5 and 20 minutes on what you're trying to summon, and it's basically like putting in a phone number, but if you mess up one syllable, you dial the wrong number and you end up summoning something else. So it's a very lengthy process in order to try to communicate with one of these quote unquote angels.
Doug, could you please elaborate on what you mean by angels? Are you talking about like Yuri physics? Sort of like the wider world of consciousness. Like states reached by DMT, or maybe
He's talking about fallen angels. I don't know if you were.
I'm talking more like a literal being with a name that is of an individual consciousness.
So we're talking about the biblical versions of angels then, their names, where they were before the fall, after the fall, that kind of thing?
We were, but we're talking about Anunnaki Magic, which is, there's reason to not believe that they're angels, that they're actually a very high form of demons. So basic, and the reason why that being is like the height of some of the people who have practiced this and witnessed the beings being summoned, talk about them being 50 stories tall, which is roughly 450 feet, which is, on a different side note, 2 different translations of the Book of Enoch put giants to be at about either 450 feet or 250 or 2.5 miles tall, depending on the source of the translation. On that side note, so it's basically an Enochian Magic. In order to interact with what they're calling an angel, you have to be able to learn a language, and you have to recite this. You have to recite this 20-minute spell with every single syllable being right. The biblical perspective on
this is a bot.
The biblical perspective on talking or encounters with angels are it's usually done like somebody speaking with God, and God, or praying to God, and God sends an angel on their behalf. Like Daniel, in order to get his encounter with an angel, not get, but because Gabriel wasn't seeking an angel, like Daniel. Daniel fasted for 21 days. And he was seeking God, and God sent an angel. So it wasn't.
I'm new here. What's going on?
Just mute yourself because we're recording a live show.
So yeah, Gabriel, he's praying to God, and he's fasting for 21 days, and he gets a visit from an angel. Ezekiel sees it in a vision because he doesn't do anything special in order to see his really strange vision of angels with 4 heads and all that. Neither does like anybody else who has like a personal interaction with an angel. They never do anything of particular efforts, other than they're either seeking God or they're just going about their day.
Doug, I have a question. So you're describing these like these stories, these biblical stories. Are you like you reference God as if God is some other being in a very dualistic fashion? You know, like subject object. You're you. These angels are them, and God is something other than them. But are you aware that the perennial philosophy, which is true, states that God is a non-dual insight, which means it doesn't make sense to talk about God as a discrete, you know, quote unquote person, which can be like contacted or communicated with, right? I mean, as long as you're like describing these stories, which is very interesting and very factual, as long as you know that like they aren't actually, you know, they don't have a lot of credibility.
Just to give a perspective for the podcast and everybody else here, because I'm getting a couple of questions about that. I am an unironic Bible thumping Christian, and I like to call God my daddy.
That's weird.
I just think it's very strange how I would most like I would probably classify myself as an atheist, like to be like a practical atheist, but like I think I understand your religion more than you do, because God isn't like I know it sounds really arrogant to say.
Conceptually, not spiritually, man.
Yeah, because like God isn't something, like God isn't God, like over there, like you can talk to God and God does shit, like you are God. Now that doesn't make sense because language is intrinsically dualistic, and you saying that you're God doesn't mean anything. But like that's the closest like way that I can like describe this to you. Like God,
all of existence is part of God.
All of yeah. Anyway, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
So just to tackle this real quick, like I'm pretty sure I don't look at God in a dualistic way, and as far as my understanding of God, the creation stands a witness to that it was created by God, that there was an intelligent designer, and the intelligent designer does exist outside of heaven and earth. But like I know it sounds weird to hear it, but I have a personal relationship with God, and it's a father-son relationship. And out of all the things that the Bible does in Christianity, it makes it apparently clear that God is after.
Have you seen God?
No. But
have you seen God?
Let me finish. I've seen the feet of Jesus, which is another topic for another time. But the whole point of biblical Christianity is that God wants to be your father, and the whole sacrifice of Christ was to give us the power to become children of God.
Yeah, but these are stories, Doug. I mean, religion is for the masses. God is one. Like the majority of these biblical texts, like the Quran and the Bible, are all bullshit. It's only the highest teachings of all of the great religions, like Judaism, Hinduism, Islamism, Christianity, that you actually find that God isn't something which you can be in contact with because you're Him. And once again, that doesn't make much sense. And I know it doesn't make much sense. But do you have anything to say about that? Because like I feel like
I go so far as to say that's a lie from the pit of hell. And I'll do another podcast about if people are interested, about the fine nuanced differences between the Quran, the Torah, and or I guess the Bible, and with a lot, and like the Vedas and stuff. I'll just go ahead and throw that in there too, because it's because the Vedas are also very close to what the Quran and the Bible are stated to be, and so, but let's try to keep this on topic.
Let me tell you something real quick. Now, you got to understand, religion is the practice of people's opinion opinion of their life about God or whatever, but you cannot take. I'm gonna give an example. You can't believe everything you read. I mean, when I found out elements, I'm gonna give an example. The darkness that we
Wait,
walk
this
in.
isn't a challenge like
No,
people's
I'm not saying
positions
a challenge, but
podcast. This is
I'm
more
trying to
of like
explain
a.
something.
This
I'm
is
trying to
more for
explain something.
Doug to present his narrative, and then
Yeah, but when in Genesis God said, "Let there be light," and it separated the darkness and the light. I have found out that the demon, the war that came, they had spread the darkness upon the earth. It's the opposite. So what I'm saying is everything you read in the Bible is not the truth that's happening now. It might have happened thousands and thousands of years ago, but what I see now, I figured out an element where I could burn darkness, and I was doing it. And I was burning demons and devils, and if you want to call it black magic or white magic, but I will rip your eyeballs out and all
this isn't
kinds of
on
things.
topic, Holy Sepulchre. I think you know that.
No, but what I'm saying is the topic is religion is a false illusion of
Doug, if you want to just
control.
talk.
The topic of this was the presentation on Enoch, the description of angels in both in the Book of Enoch sense compared to the occultic sense.
Hey, Doug, I got an interesting point we can go off of. Just that will go off of what you've been talking about, but the reoccurring themes you talked about, like antediluvian or flood narratives, maybe even crucified narratives, or even just battles between giants, like the Titanomachy in Greek mythology, or Azir Vanir, Hinduism, and the angels fighting in the heavens. Like these are reoccurring themes that have gone throughout all cultures. It's not just in Christianity. I don't know if you want to expand on that.
Yeah. So in Enoch, like, the giants are predispositioned to evil. They'll eat everything from like entire fields of grain to entire villages of people. Which is why like the entire earth laid accusation against them, and the whole flood came, but there are still giants in the land after that. And there's different speculations as to why. But it had to do with knowledge remaining, which caused that. So in every single culture, even post-flood, and even still to this day, like in our modern day and era, we have accounts of most red-haired giants with 6 fingers were anywhere between 9 and 15 feet tall today, and their descriptions that still place them about 150 foot tall, up to 1,000-ish years ago, where they just kind of eat people and they hang out in the woods. What's that that series of documentaries and books about people disappearing in national forests? It's like Missing 411 or something.
Right.
Is that the correct name of it, or?
I think so, yeah.
So in this is going to be a kind of a big side point, but I feel like it's necessary to bring up. So a lot of these missing 411 disappearances are part of like the largest cave systems in America, and the idea is that giants and I'll go ahead and bring this in. Reptilians come out, and they occasionally take people from these places because and I realize like it's not all of the missing 411 cases, but like some of the really like I guess strange ones are like, so there was a missing kid. He was basically barely a toddler, and when they go searching for him, they eventually find him alive. I think he's missing his shoes, and he's like literally like 1,200 feet above an elevation, and he's missing his shoes. He doesn't have a scratch on his feet, but he's 1,200 feet above like where they're searching for him. Like, how does a toddler climb? And I also think it was like several miles. So how does a toddler go several miles and like ascend a fifth of a mile up in like very heinous conditions? Also, and when you get to like stories of people that are not found and just basically remains, you find like torn clothing and a few bones of the person, and it's almost like some whatever happened, like it literally ate everything and was even eating bones, and the bones it didn't eat, it licked clean. And it's like in the Native Americas, they do the hand waving thing because so the Native Americans could count your fingers because they're terrified of 6-fingered men. And this wasn't really a story to them. It was a very real like threat. Same like the Cyclops in the Odyssey with Iliad. The Cyclops was gonna like straight up eat those guys. Like,
Is one of the basic themes of Christianity, with respect to religion, would you say one of the basic themes of being spiritual or being Christian is transformation?
Kind of off topic, but yeah, that's the Greek word for repentance. I don't remember, but it literally, when you look at the Greek word for repentance, it literally means to change your mind or renew your mind. And you basically flip a whole 180 with it. And like I used to be an atheist, and when I understood that there is a God, one of the things I had to do was take everything I ever thought about anything and anything and throw it out the window and build a new perspective from scratch.
Not to interrupt, could you please elaborate?
Just to give a point of reference, again, like my only standard of truth today is like the Bible. Like I do think there are things that are true in Vedic theology. I do hold to the idea that Greek and Egyptian and Nordic and et cetera, theological stories are non-fictional history. But that's another conversation for a different time. To get back on point, yeah, there's a whole underlying theme of giants, and in every single mythology, well, not every single one, but I guess in the more well-preserved ones, you have the battle of gods in Hinduism, where they're literally using like nuclear type-esque weapons. There's immense power, and they're just killing each other for no reason. You have the story of Ragnarok, where it's actually, what I find most interesting about Ragnarok is that it's a prophecy, and they don't really have a source for they don't have a really source for it. They just say it's history. It's just it's history already being told, and there's nothing they could really do about it. With the Greeks, they had the Clash of the Titans, and then they have, interestingly enough, they have Zeus banishing a bunch of these beings to Tartarus. So probably one of the more interesting. What I would like to say is, like, God intervening in the world, at least in a biblical and Christian perspective, isn't limited to, I guess, just the Middle East. When you really start to understand like God and who He is and what He does, you realize that He's had a hand in every part of the world, and He has a historical count of every part in the world as far as what happens in the heaven above and hell beneath. But it's kind of hidden from the rest of the world right now.
Yeah, you're right. But you got to understand, in the book of Revelation, it's talking about people worshiping false idols. The Catholic Church is bowing down and kissing the cross, and it's a false idol. I mean, I was raised Catholic, and I'm trying to save y'all because the moon is when you talk about angels, You're actually talking about aliens too. It's a reference for aliens. If you know knowledge about things at this time. So fallen angels could be evil aliens that came to Earth as a war, said, we want this Earth. You know, if you're going to take over the women of this planet, you're going to have to conquer us first and kill us all or run us off this planet to get these women. And there was a war. The last war is a very evil race, and I've seen them face to face. Praying Mantis, I mean, the Dracos, I mean, you know, a whole bunch. I could name a whole bunch of types of aliens that is very dangerous. You know, and you can't believe everything that's in religion. I see darkness upon this earth, and we're walking in darkness. I talked to a dead deer on the side of the road. I thought it had a baby. I was going to gut it. You know what the deer was saying? I got to go help Sirius. I got to go help Sirius. And I was like freaking out. I said, oh, man, the deer's talking to me. And I was afraid that the deer would start talking because I know I could talk to the dead. And I learned about this dude named Sirius. Well, the deer is stuck in the body. The earth is in darkness. It's got like a river above, like it might be 20, 30 feet tall, of pure darkness on top of the trees, above the trees. And it's a curse. It's an alien technology. That's all it is. It's nothing to do with God. And they spread the darkness upon the earth to control us, the men, you know, and saw us in half and all that stuff. But I have to tell you the truth. I am a messenger beyond many messengers upon this earth. And the misinterpretation of the scripture is big. False prophets all over the place. Y'all blind. It's a blind slave planet. But I'm gonna shut me off right now, but I want to let y'all know we're walking in darkness. And I'm doing the Open Eye Project to open your eyes. Okay, over and out.
So I like to bring this into a couple of modern accounts of fallen angels. There's one testimony I'm particularly fond of. This guy was talking about how he was in Rome and he was going through like an old Roman fort that was before the 3rd century, I think AD, because at a certain point, at a certain year, I can't remember exactly what century, but the Romans would change the direction of their staircases because it took them however many hundreds of years to figure out, but the way they were building them before gave a disadvantage to soldiers fighting on the high ground because the staircase was angled towards someone fighting with their left hand up, or it was disadvantage to people who would fight with their right hand, who had the high ground on the staircase. So they changed the direction of their spiral staircases. So he was talking about how, you know, that was a thing to like make a note of the time frame. So he's going down this place, he's going down his catacomb, and he goes through a large cave system, and then he sees 2 blue-skinned, red-eyed angels, fallen angels, that are about 30-ish feet tall, and one of them has got their hands on their cheeks, like he's lovingly looking at something, or he's in a daze, and then he gets literally startled by this man and there's the 6 other people that are with him, and he looks at them and he goes, "You are not supposed to be here." And then the man just looks at him and he's like, I am here by divine appointment by the Lord Jesus Christ." And the fallen angel's like, he's like, "Oh, okay, I'll just be on my way." And the guy's like, "Not so fast." And he quotes the scripture from Jude, and it's like, you are cast into chain, or you'll be wrapped in chains and cast into everlasting darkness until the day of judgment, because you kept not your first habitation. And then these chains came down and they wrapped up like these fallen angels, like kind of like a cocoon, or like you wrap a bunch of dental floss around your finger or something, and then they all of a sudden the guy was back in his hotel room in his underwear or something. Um, it was just like and he gets on about like being translated into places. On a side note, like people like Philip, they were when they would do something, they would disappear and be taken somewhere else in the spirit, or by the spirit rather. So that was just a modern day account of fallen angels. And I want to do it like it's going to be anecdotal, personal, but it has to do with like the idea of spiritual warfare. Um, since this is a slightly related topic, so I was working, and there was a couple with another man, and you could tell they were about to like try to engage in a swinger activity. And so what I did is when I looked at them, I said, I rebuke that spirit of adultery, and I pray that man flee for where the wicked flee where no one pursues. And so the guy ended up like literally like walking away. He didn't even say bye to them. He just went to the bathroom and left. And they had that disappointed look on the couple had that disappointed look in their face that they didn't get all freaky. But it's being able to perceive stuff in that kind of spiritual world. And you begin to see, like, when you start thinking of spiritual things like this, you start thinking about angels and demons, and you start learning how I guess the material that gives them that addresses them at like an individual consciousness, you start learning about how they work.
I know how they work, but why they work is more so. I'm just curious about it. I don't want to go all the way back to the garden, but what is the lie that they're trying, to sell to us here on Earth?
I have, I guess the idea would be to exalt Lucifer as God.
Doug, I just wanted to ask. You mentioned earlier that you were an atheist and then you found God. Could you please elaborate, if you could, please, sort of that experience for you? Like, what exactly happened in your life? What events led up to you suddenly turning from an atheist into a believer in God? Like, surely you had some sort of profound spiritual experience.
I did, but this is not the time or place for that. I like to wrap up with any questions, and I don't mind getting into it, but I'd like to wrap up this discussion about Enoch. Anything else about giants?
Well, we started with the Book of Enoch, right? And I figured we could just kind of end there with just what their mission is. What is it? How is it currently unfolding? And I guess what we can do to, arm ourselves against it or be aware of it, because it's happening, right? This isn't something, at least for those who ascribe to that account. Like, I mean, I myself too, I'm a Christian. I know that this is something that we wrestle with daily. So I don't know if you can expand on that a bit.
So I guess I'll just wrap up with these final points about Enoch itself. So at the beginning of the Book of Enoch, it says that this book is for it's not for this generation, which being the time it was written. And like I said, there's some Jewish traditions that put Enoch being older than the Torah, or before the Torah rather, because the Torah was written in like 1400 BC. On a side note, the Book of Job also holds the same tradition, and it was that Moses had actually found it, or God revealed it to him, or told him like where to dig it up or something. I don't remember, but that references to or Jewish traditions that reference the Book of Enoch as being older and a little higher than the Torah because it deals with heaven. Anyway, it says that this book was not meant for this generation, but for a generation to come, which is the last generation. So if you Christians, or you like apocalypse, like the world's ending kind of deal, like ought to take time. This book is written for like the last generation on Earth. So it's worth taking the time to study and take at face value initially. And another thing that it does is it kind of deals with like a lot of prophecy stuff. When you if you have a good grasp on like the Old Testament, if you have a grasp on the Old Testament, it deals with a lot of prophecies concerning Moses. It deals with a lot of end time prophecies. And
Hey, I agree with you about Enoch and Job. Them books were before the other writings. I agree with you.
I disagree with that. I disagree.
I think Enoch thing happened beyond the other times as well as the war. But then they had the other one about Job, but no one can prove it, but I'm just saying. Because they had a writing saying he was talking to Job, God was talking to Job, and it happens to do with my birthday. The springtime knows his place, that he's going to grab the ends of the earth and shake the wicked out of it. I tell you what, I'm I'm the person that's spring. I can't stand evil. I will kill you. I will burn your ass up with fire, just like Notre Dame said. He said, someone's going to die on the day of their birth at the end of the prophecy. He said, burn, 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 fire, fire, fire. He says, only 70 of us are going to survive, and Saturn's going to come too late. I know the ending of the prophecies, of Notre Dame, too.
Doug, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
All
right. What's your stance on, since Enoch is a son of Cain, right, and the royals of the area that is associated with the Old Testament would consider themselves sons of Cain. So is there not a
There's two different Enochs. The Enoch from the line of Cain is not the Enoch that wrote the Book of Enoch.
Wait, what?
Yeah, so when you look at the lineage of Adam, it goes like, okay, so there's Adam, and then he had Abel and Cain as sons, yeah? And so what happens is after Cain is exiled, Adam has another son named Seth. And then from that lineage that's the Enoch he's talking about. The Enoch of the line of Cain isn't the one this is talking about. This Enoch built cities. The scripture doesn't mention the Enoch from the line of Cain being ascended into heaven. And by the way, Cain and his children are still mostly godly men, I would still say, on the basis that because rebellion, like, there's more mention of rebellion in Adam's line than there is Cain's line. Like, rebellion really started with Enosh, which means mortal sorrow. The name Enoch itself in Hebrew, it actually means to teach. And basically the idea is Enoch taught people how to gather in cities, which, it isn't a good or evil thing. It's just kind of a thing that can be good or evil, because New Jerusalem's a city, and you wouldn't call the person who built the city of New Jerusalem evil, because that'd be Jesus. So I also don't buy, like, because this also deals with like the two seed theory, like the seed of the serpent comes through Cain. But Nimrod, like, literally tried to kill God, and when he says he was a mighty hunter before the Lord, it more closely means in Hebrew that he was a mighty hunter in rebellion of the Lord. He was somebody who was hunting souls. Nimrod didn't come from Cain. Nimrod came from Noah. So it's
But wouldn't that shine light on the corruption of the bloodline through Noah's family, like that it's still preserved?
I mean, so there's I can't. What are the names of Noah's three sons?
Ham, Seth, and Japheth, I believe.
So which one was Christ from, and which one was Nimrod from?
I think Nimrod was from. He was from the Ham line, I believe.
Yeah.
Same with the Canaanites. Like, the Canaanites were descendants of Ham, and
Yeah.
he would be the grandson of Noah, essentially.
Yeah. So Like keep him. Yeah, the Canaanites were the line of giants didn't survive through Cain. The line of giants survived through Noah. Like there was a corruption in his family. And like I said, the book of Joshua puts, and it would be Ham because Nimrod was from Ham. That Ham found like some kind of information from these fallen angel times, and that's how the whole giant equation got brought back into it, or the speculation that giants live by hiding in cave systems, which is why you have a lot of stories about how when people go into these underground caves, they they find like giant remains or cities of giants and stuff like that.
Excuse me, Doug.
What's up?
That's cool and all, but I really don't remember asking.
Thanks, man. That was some great input.
So, at what point did they become disembodied?
Right after
or is that just a perspective that they were disembodied, but they also survived in the physical as giants?
No, they became disembodied when they killed each other in a war. All the giants.
But we're saying some still survived and went under.
The point of disembodiment would be the point at the individual's death. Like each demonic spirit would have been a Nephilim, and like basically like so none of like I don't think any of the first generation Nephilim survived. But it's yeah, basically like they just came from the spirit became disembodied at the moment of its death.
Oh, Doug. Is it possible for you now, if you're done speaking about angels and whatnot, to because I am very curious as to your like personal journey with regards to spirituality and finding God. Unless you're uncomfortable.
No, I'm perfectly fine sharing my story. I just want to wrap up the podcast with if anybody else has any questions relating to Enoch or occultism regarding angels or anything miscellaneous about other spiritual beings in the heavens, or I'm sorry, in other mythologies or giants.
This is a short question. You may not. I don't know if you have the answer. I'm trying to find the answer myself. Were there any kings at the time that Enoch was alive? I'm reading Enoch was born in Babylon. That would put him around kings, right?
Enoch, no, Babylon was post-flood, and Enoch was pre-flood. Like there's
Enoch didn't necessarily write this book either. Like from every source that I've ever gathered.
Are you sure they're not referring to like the first Babylon or something, Doug? Is that they're not
the first Babylon would have been the Tower of Babel, and that would have been the tower that Nimrod was building.
Okay.
Edgelord, can angels possess people, or can they use humans as vessels? Like, who's not that I'm aware of. I've never heard of anything like that. And even then, in both Christian and occultism, a complete possession of a person is very rare, and it's usually only done by demons.
I should add to that quickly. Hebrews 13:2 says, "Be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unaware." So by the scripture, it says you don't even necessarily know that you're talking or entertaining an angel.
Yeah, like the angels have, I guess, a dichotomy in their appearances. They can be like angels in the Old Testament are terrifying. Like they have 4 heads. They look like strange animals. They have several wings. Like the seraphim are. I don't want to get into the animalistic description of it because it's very controversial. But they have 6 wings. The cherubim have 4 heads, 3 of them being of animals with 4 wings. It's and others are kind of like these, I guess, like Sphinx or something. And this is where you get chimeras, because one of the things with the cutting of roots, which I believe interpreted correct, or if this interpretation is correct, is the cutting of DNA, and they were cutting DNA of animals together, which is where
Man, like, Doug, I feel like you're just geeking out and nerding out over the lore of the Book of Enoch. Like, you're just sort of explaining and reciting these stories, which I just think, in my opinion, if I could share my opinion, it's really just filler. Like, these stories in these books are just to teach lessons and to get the masses who subscribe to religions engaged. Like, I don't really understand why this is so interesting to you, which is why I asked my previous question. Is there any relation between the Book of Enoch and you finding God? Because once again, Doug, I'm very interested as to how you found God.
As soon as I'll make this the last question, we'll wrap up the podcast, we'll end the recording, and I'll share my testimony with the whole server. Unless Shogun feel like, I don't mind putting it in the podcast either.
Wait,
Edgebot has a question. Edgebot, you want to go and ask your question? She's been asking for a few minutes.
So did I answer that angels possess people?
Where in scripture would you find that?
Demons possess people, not angels.
Would it just be in the Book of Enoch, or?
No, that would be more New Testament. Or not. There's no, not as far as I'm aware, there's no account of a fallen angel possessing a person.
What about Legion? We are many. When Jesus cast out.
Hey, let me give you the definition of a fallen angel. That means an alien that's evil that came to cause war upon this earth. A fallen angel is an alien force that with spaceships and all that and took over this planet. That's what a fallen angel is. I have met real angels, and they actually said, we're the real angels, and they had wings. I saw them. But they came down and they left because this domain is taken over. And another thing is, devil possession is not very few. It's all over the world. Everybody on this planet is a blind slave planet, and you're possessed by the devil and controlled by the devil with this religion stuff. You worship false idol.
Doug, it says that Enoch was born in Babylon.
It would have to be a different Enoch, and
Seth.
Get a
I'm just saying, if he was born in Babylon and there were kings around him, then would you entertain the idea that the fallen angels came to teach the kings these tools of society for the king's benefit, or would you not entertain this idea?
I haven't read that in Enoch. I don't. So from what I understand from Enoch, it is like it seemed more like this information was spread throughout all mankind, and it wasn't limited to just the elite. I mean, it's kind of a misnomer of a point, I would say.
I think we're confusing the other Enoch, which is Cain's son, Enoch. So the other one was the antediluvian Cain in the Hebrew Bible, which was Enoch, son of Jared, and fathered by Methuselah. So yeah, I think there might be a different Enoch he's referencing.
Well, and I wanted to point out too, like the Book of Enoch, it's not just one book. Like this consists of 5 separate books, and from everything that I've ever gathered of the Book of Enoch, it's not just one author; it's multiple authors.
So you disputed or you disagreed with the Enoch or the Book of Enoch being older than the Torah.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
I just wanted to present that was a thing in Jewish tradition. Whether or not it's true, I don't have a lot of stake in. But on the other hand, I personally take this as an account like from Enoch himself. And keep in mind, this would mean that like just the basis of the text of Enoch being in heaven and never tasting death, he could have been in heaven for however many how many years are between the flood and Noah. I mean, it could have been 800 years between where Enoch went into heaven and experienced all this and when he decided to write the book.
Yeah, Enoch, I understand. Like he never actually died; he ascended
Yeah.
essentially, so he never experienced death. But the
Yeah.
earliest versions of this book that we find that aren't just fragments are written in 15th century Ethiopian Ge'ez language. But there are earlier texts, but they're just fragments of it. So at that point that would lead me to a question: do you think this is a preserved word of God, or do you think it's not preserved for a reason? Because I know you are a Christian.
We have actually a complete Enoch in the Dead Sea Scrolls, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it's not in the Dead Sea Scrolls. I know that for a fact.
Are you sure?
I'm 100% sure.
I'm gonna put a footnote in that, and I'm gonna check that for myself because anyway.
It's the only book that wasn't found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, actually. So yeah, I appreciate the humble heart and checking it out.
So I like knowing like Enoch 1, Enoch 2 and 3. I'll throw under the bus and say that those are texts that you can dispute pretty well because they're also really strange. But from the content of Enoch 1 itself, I find no reason to doubt that it is preserved Word of God.
So that would be the Book of Watchers, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry. No. I would say the complete Book of Enoch, not just like the Book of Watchers. Because wait.
Well, it's made of 5 books, right? So the first book would be the Book of Watchers. The second one was the Book of Parables, and the Book of Parables was essentially that is the one that I've heard claimed does not exist in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And from everything I've gathered, it doesn't look like it's there. And then the third is the astronomical book, and the fourth is what is it?
Okay.
The Book of Dream Visions, and then the Epistle of Enoch.
The Dead Sea Scrolls do reference Malik and Joseph, which are the publishers of, or the ones who wrote the Book of Enoch. I think is the way they referenced it as discovered in Qumran.
Yeah, well, it's multiple authors, right? So it's something you have to consider. That it wasn't
I'm just saying
one or two people either, but yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't the complete Book of Enoch, but it was referenced through one of many writers, Malik Joseph.
So I would say like stuff for like the Book of Methuselah, like that's like Methuselah's account. Whether or not he wrote it himself, like I don't know, but I don't have a reason to doubt that those are his words. Same thing with the Book of Noah. Like the thing that makes Enoch stand as a divinely inspired text is it calls out sin as sin, and it doesn't contradict the scriptures. It doesn't put God down. It glorifies him. It glorifies that God's redeeming power for mankind. It's like based on like not I guess so much as the
So is it accurate with the cosmology? Because that's one contradiction in the Book of Enoch I've found, is that it doesn't line up with the biblical cause.
It actually it does, because biblical cosmology. I don't know if you're a flat earther or not.
No, not at all.
Okay, so the biblical account of the Earth is that it's flat and stationary and fixed upon pillars. That's a whole other topic.
I think you would have to take things out of context to say that in full, because it never actually mentions it's flat. It's not that I denounce the fact that there was an ice dome over the Earth. The Jews taught that for as long as But...
So you're on Kent Hovind's thing, kind of.
What do you mean?
Kent Hovind taught that there was an ice firmament around a heliocentric Earth.
Oh no, he didn't teach that. That's been held for a long time. Okay. And the science.
I hate to interrupt y'all, but I found something.
Let me finish this point, Holy, with Gargon. Right. So at another time, because I guess I'm going to get into my whole story about how I found God, just to appease Cossack and give a point of reference. But it's another time I'll go through like the scriptures with you, and I'll show you how the earth is explicitly stationary and fixed upon pillars, and it's not revolving around the sun. But that's a whole other thing for another time. So if anything, the heliocentric model spread by the Jesuits since the 1500s is the thing that's in contradiction with scriptures, not the other way around. Enoch validates the biblical cosmology, and the biblical cosmology validates Enoch.
Sorry, go ahead.
So, and like I said, it's a big marker of how I determine things are truth is what it says about sin and what it says about you, because like it's and this book calls sin as sin. Like it talks about fallen angels teaching astrology, but it also and other stuff like that, but it also puts it as a source of complete wickedness that spread iniquity on the earth. So it's not like, it's a strange book because it's talking about an angel teaching astrology, but they're missing the point of how this was an evil thing, and it takes this somehow strange death sentence in Levitical law, and it gives a point of origin as to why it's evil. So,
well, I want to point something out. I found. I talked about the darkness that spread upon the earth, and I found it in Job. And he said, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day he was born because he was suffering. I'm suffering the same stuff that Job's going. I'm being attacked every day physically. I have to fight back or whatever. And I understand what he's saying. And then he says, let there be darkness. Let that day be darkness. May God above not seek it, nor light shine on it, and that means the darkness that I'm talking about. Now, I never really realized that, and it says, "Let gloom and deep darkness claim it," and it says, "Let clouds dwell above it." That's that darkness I saw that night. I was trying to burn it up. So there is darkness. It says, let the blackness of the day terrify it. You see what I'm saying? In the night, let the thick darkness seize it.
So
that's that evil darkness I've been talking about.
Okay, I'm running out of time.
Chapter 3 in Job.
Wait, I have a quick question, Doug. Are you the special guest of this podcast?
I guess we literally just threw this together in like 5 minutes. And
well, please don't feel rushed. Don't feel like you have to end it or anything.
I have to go to work soon.
Oh, okay. Well then, please go.
So I'm gonna tell a detailed version of my testimony. So I was an atheist. I had a surgery that was pretty invasive and violent, and I had a whole bunch of complications with it. And it involved getting a metal implant to fix a deformity in my body. So I had all kinds of complications with it, and it was making me incredibly like unhealthier. I lost like 25 pounds. I was very weak, and because of the implant, I couldn't do anything to, I guess, fix my physical health. And so I was at a complete broken state. I also suffered from like a plethora of, I guess, socially disorderly things like porn addiction. I was thinking about suicide every day, even before I had my surgery. I actually struggled with suicide since I was like a little kid. So like when I was like, just sick and tired of all of it, like I got in like I guess what I call a prayer closet, and I got down on my knees and I started praying. And my prayer was like, God, I don't know who you are. I don't know if you're real. And I started naming off every single god I can think of in every single mythology. And I'm like, I don't know if you're this guy over here. I don't know if you're that guy over there. I don't know if you're Allah. I don't know if you're Zeus. I don't know if you're Shiva. I don't know if you're Vishnu. I don't know if you're Thor. I don't know if you're Odin. I don't know if you're Yahweh and the Jews are right and Jesus isn't your son, or if the Christians are right and that Jesus is your son and that you're God anyway. And like I named off every single god I could think of. I'm like, I don't know who you are. I don't know if you're real. I just know I need help. And then after I made that prayer, I just chilled out in my room for a while. And I was actually, I was weeping at this point. And after I got done crying, my whole room filled with like a light made out of smoke called aether, Aether. It's a property in physics and metaphysics. It's called Akasha in the Hindu. And it filled my whole room. It behaved just like smoke. And it gave me such peace. And I could play with it with my hands, and I try to breathe it into my lungs because I was like, I don't know what this stuff is, but I want it in my lungs. And so I scooted it into my face, but I couldn't move it with my breath. And no matter what I did, I could move it with my pillow, I could move it with my hands, but I couldn't move it with my breath. I theorized that I could, but I didn't have the required equipment and for it to enter into my body. And so when I had that happen, I flipped the 180. I'm like, oh, there is a God, there's a soul, there's a spirit. And I set out on a huge research project to understand what I saw. My very first step was to understand what aether is. And even after however many years of research, I still don't know.
I had a word theory of the world and its basic components, though. Even in the beginning, they would try to define certain elements and aspects of the natural world, like aether, for instance. And in the Greek language, there's actually like several words for love too. So they had like a pre-modern working definition of what the world was and the elements that made it.
Yeah, I'm looking at this word right now, ether, and I've never come across it before, Doug, and it seems very interesting. So you saw this as like a source?
And so I saw this as like a physical manifestation, and it completely changed my life. And when I started researching it, like Plato calls it the upper air the gods breathe. When I started looking at it in the science aspect, and this is a large reason why I'm a flat earther. This is the particular subject that caused that. In the last 100 years, the application or the study of aether has either been non-existent or it's been completely disputed. I talked with a guy who was getting a master in physics, and he berated me for an hour, calling me stupid because saying aether doesn't exist, and the Michelson-Morley experiment proved it. When the greatest minds in physics, like Einstein, and the people who designed the experiment went on for their whole lives talking about aether like it does exist, and Einstein and the people who designed the experiment all stated that that the experiment was designed in failure, and because of the parameters of the experiment, were not capable of producing a positive result for aether, and went on their whole lives talking about it like it existed. Einstein couldn't. He talked about aether. He knew it existed. He taught like it existed. He even had energy equations for aether, but he couldn't make it work in his theory of relativity.
Yeah, but ether is very flammable. I know for a fact.
I'm not talking about the chemical. I'm talking about something way different. I'm not talking about the physical element.
He's talking about AETHER.
Yeah.
Ether is very flammable, dude. I mean, if I want to kill my
dude, you're trolling.
I would cast ether on them and light a match. Boom,
dude.
It's we're talking about something way different right now. It's not what you're talking about. Anyway, so that was like the first step to showing me like science was pretty fraudulent, like for the last 100 years. And then when I realized that that science had been unreliable for the past 100 years, I started looking to the more ancient ways of thinking about aether as a classical element. I ran into things like the Akashic records, and it resonated with me because I felt like I had a super access to information because I spent like time around this kind of thing. So I did this theology lab. I studied every world mythology. I studied every religion. I studied like the Vedas, the Quran, Greek mythology, the Akashic records.
Did y'all ever hear about the blue dust? Because I've seen spirits with this blue dust. they put it on them so when they in the sky, the spirit, it's like camouflage. So if the sky is blue, I experienced blue dust on my motorbike. I call him Big Blue. He came flying over me on my motorbike and dropped all this dust.
Holy, I'm
and
running
the
out of
spirit,
time. I want to get through the story.
what?
So I did this whole theology lap, and then I ended up on Hinduism because I was doing yoga, and one of the things I had an equation, and this is part of this equation is also why I support things. I kind of support things like Hermetic alchemy in a very raw and primal form, not like the Hermetic alchemy we have today. Is I wanted a personal relationship with God. I wanted to walk into heaven. I wanted to cleanse myself of sin because I knew I sinned. Like when I figured out God is real, I realized the sanctity of marriage, and like I've committed adultery before, so I needed an answer for that. So
Can I comment on the topic of sin just for 1 second?
sure.
I think that sin it's your choosing. You have to choose to sin. And what I mean by that is that you look at yourself as the person with choices, and you know you are yourself because you have your own biology, and you understand that the world you live in is what it is. But you can choose to sin, and I think that the reason that sin exists is because God gives you an idea, a way to God lets you sin, and when you sin, you get the consequences of it. So if you're just like just not as smart as you think. Well, okay, everyone thinks they're smart, right? But are you as smart as you think you are? So God says, okay, let's go to this world where there is a lot of sin, and you can choose to sin if you want, right? I think everyone has sinned in this world, but the consequences of the sin are like they teach you why it's bad. I think that's what the world exists for. If you sin, you learn the consequences. I think that's part of what's going on.
So on this note, I'll have a quick whip, and then I'll finish the rest of my story because I'm getting close to the end. There are two teachers. There's wisdom and there's consequence. Wisdom teaches you the lesson and tells you what the consequence is. Consequence gives you the lesson, but it demands you pay a price of pain. So wisdom would be like you learn from something without having to suffer for the consequence of it. Anyway, so so I didn't become like a Greek pagan. I wasn't worshiping Zeus because I fundamentally understood that because Greece glorified a god of adultery that constantly cheated on his wife. That's why the Greek civilization fell into this big old homosexual pedophile ring. Why Greek civilization ultimately fell.
That's actually not true. Go on.
Anyway, and I didn't become a Muslim because they had sex slaves and their god was able to lie, and it was basically like convert or die kind of thing. It was basically like this big old homicidal mess. So I ran into Hinduism. Oh, on a fourth point, I wanted power to be able to make a bird out of clay and put the breath of life into it, because that was the common theme I found in all mythology. And I figure like if I'm made in an image of God, if I have a personal relationship with God, I would be taught how to be able to do that and to raise the dead. So the second closest thing I ever found to that was Hinduism and yoga. because those are things that like promised power without having to do these weird occultic things. On a side note, I also I was gonna try to practice Anunnaki Magic. I was gonna try to practice Anunnaki Magic, but when I was learning the language and learning the letters, I thought, like, what would I go to an angel for that I couldn't go to God for?
Exactly.
And so, and I was looking for God, and like I thought I found it. I was pretty close with Hinduism, and then so when I was studying Shiva, I fell in love with some of the stories. Like one of them was it was a yoga story about how these angels and demons lost their immortality, so they have to churn a mountain. They have to turn a mountain into an ocean using a giant snake in order to make a nectar of immortality. And the first thing they make is a poison. So Shiva, out of an act of love, drinks the poison in order to save the world. But he doesn't die. That's the key point. His wife holds the poison in his throat, and his throat turns blue, and then they make the nectar of immortality, and they live. And so I thought, okay, if I want power to if I want to. And so when I saw that, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be a Shiva worshiper. This is God, right? So I started getting it in my head that I want to wear an 18-foot king cobra around my neck and drink poison because that's what my God did. And and when I started posting on 4chan and these metaphysics boards, people call me crazy, and I'm like, can you do something more interesting than call me crazy? And one guy, he pointed me to a Bible verse, and I'm gonna link it in special events right now. It's this Bible verse, and he was like, hey, what you're saying is not too far from the Bible. And then, because it says in this verse that they shall take up serpents, they drink any deadly thing, it shall not hurt them, they shall lay hands on the sick and recover, which is something like I wanted to do because I was coming to a point where I believe that really powerful prayer with someone who's in relationship with God could heal someone of any disease. I also casted out a devil in Jesus' name right before this, or right around this time. So I don't know if it was before or after this, because this was like my sleep paralysis attack. So I'm like, when I started reading that, I'm like, okay, who's this God fellow in the Bible? And then when I started studying the Bible, I heard a presentation about how Revelation is the only book in the Bible that promises a special blessing for the reader. It's like, hey, on the first page, it's like, hey, read me, I'm special. And basically what happened was I read it. I read Revelation. I'm like, okay, God, where's my blessing? And then I read John 20:21, Proverbs 8, 9, and 10. I had a huge curiosity about Mary Magdalene because she was the first person Jesus goes to visit. She's the person she charges with the resurrection, and she can teach her. So I'm wondering what he taught her, why she was the first person that he went to go see, and why he told her to go tell everybody else that he was risen. And then I read Proverbs 89:14, and it's wisdom personified. Like she makes dinner tables, she calls the people, she laughs at people in their calamity. I'm like, okay, and one of the scriptures was wisdom was calling you, and I thought, okay, I just got a blessing. I want to know who Mary Magdalene is, and wisdom is calling me by my name. So I'm like, okay, I go look her up. She has a gospel, and that's what made me believe in Jesus. Like I already believed and knew there was a God beforehand, and like I would do these practices before I had the Bible where I'm like, okay, God is in my breath. He gave me my breath and I know he takes responsibility over it, because if I had to be conscious of my own breath, I would die because I would forget to breathe. So God loves us so much, he breathes for us. And when I was in that mode, I felt closer to God when I was doing that than I actually have recently, just due to like certain issues going on in my life. But it's like I knew there was God, but it took a couple years to get to Jesus as who would be my main conduit to God. Like I don't need an idol. I don't need a like anything kind of exterior. I just have Crap, I missed my bus. Anyway,
I'll send an Uber. Thanks, Doug.
That's how I got or received salvation. Like, I've gotten closer to, like, so my goals of, like, wanting a personal relationship with God, wanting to have my sins are paid for, or wiped from the record, and my whole life has changed. I feel like I'm pretty close to, like, operating in the power of raising the dead and making birds out of clay and putting the breath of life into it. And that might sound like heresy to some of the other Christians here, but
Doug, would you say you're suicidal still?
No. So I struggled with, like, I struggled with it since I was a little kid, and it got so bad by the time I was in my mid-20s or early 20s. I think it was even earlier than that, because I was thinking about, for the longest time, I was thinking about this, like, literally every minute of every day. And I would get in bed at the end of my day. I'm like, why did I just spend the whole day thinking about killing myself?
Wait, so, like, how young are we talking?
Probably about 8.
So, like, the thoughts would be like,
yeah,
like killing yourself by
hanging,
just randomly.
slitting my throat. Like, it'd be a pretty violent image of me doing it to myself.
Did you ever talk to your parents about this, or
no? I don't really talk to my parents at all. So, anyway, the point being is, like, it wasn't until after I was studying the words of Jesus, where I was doing it for, like, a couple months, or not a couple months. I was doing it for a while, and I got in the shower, and then I had a sudden realization that, like, I can't even remember the last time I thought about killing myself. And what like God revealed to me was, like, that was a spirit, like, over my life that that had been oppressing me my whole life, and it wasn't until I came to Jesus where that spirit was driven out.
Well, if I could just speak for the whole group here, Doug, I just have to say that it's actually been quite a pleasure listening to you speaking. I actually have been looking up Wikipedia articles about, the Akashic records, etheric planes, and all sorts of things. So it's been a pleasure, sir.
Likewise. I think that about covered all my bases. Did anyone have any closing questions? Because I got a few minutes before I have to leave.
I had a strange, weird realization when you were giving your testimony that, like, a really comforting, like, everything's okay, you are saved, you are in good hands from your message. But there's a strange realization of these disembodied spirits, or these angels, or these, false gods that want to be worshipped, are trying to somehow sabotage the blessing that was already given to us on the cross, that we don't need to work for. It's just by faith, not by works. So it's like we already have the greatest thing that has been given to us, and every day is a struggle to maintain it. Not giving in to sin, not giving in to false teachings, not giving in to just people that are trying to make you fall from it, from what you already have, what's been given to you.
Like, what's the point of this chat room? What are we talking about?
Well, it was originally a conversation about the Book of Enoch and this idea of angels and demons between biblical thinking and occult thinking, and then it evolved into, I guess, the circumstances that led me to, I guess, gather all this information. Because I think it's fair to say that I presented both views at their source material without a bias. twisting their words rather.
If I could just give a quick little summary of what I think about everything that you've said, Doug. I think that a lot of what you are talking about is essentially law, and a lot of it, in my personal opinion, is I don't want to use a derogative term, but BS. But don't think I'm being passive aggressive here. I do think that you did have a very spiritual experience, and I actually don't know a lot about this ether stuff. I'm going to look into it. I'm personally trying to bridge the gap between science and spirituality, because I think that the gap, as society in the Western world perceives it, is it's like a culturally enforced illusion. Like I think they're one and the same thing. So I think that there's many truths to what you've said, but I personally wouldn't rely too much on scripture, because it's not like everything in the Bible is like canon and like truthful. There's different teachings, and I would really just focus on the highest teachings of each religion. Are you familiar with the perennial philosophy?
The word is the way, my man.
Are you familiar? Is anyone here familiar with the perennial philosophy?
You can't focus on the word. The word is living.
Is that like the golden rule? You treat others as you want to be treated.
No, the perennial philosophy is the realization which many people like Carl Jung and even Aldous Huxley subscribe to, which is the fact that if you take the highest teachings of all the great major religions, like even Judaism, Islamism, and whatnot, you realize that they're all non-dual teachings, and they're all saying the same thing. Essentially,
The Ten Commandments.
Essentially that you are God, and people were burnt at the stake literally by expressing this truth, right? Because people don't take it lightly or kindly when some bozo just says I'm God, and they're like, no, you're not God, like clearly.
We're all God lowercase g, but I don't think we're all God capital G.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
I know God. He's my magical sky daddy. I can personally attest to the fact that I am not him. I am made in his image, and I am supposed to look like.
You're stuck right now in a dualistic way of thinking. Like the self is an illusion. You are not something other than other people, right? This is a whole topic of conversation. I don't think I'm going to get into it, but I would highly recommend just some key words to like look into: non-duality, perennial philosophy, and look into a guy called Douglas Harding. That's all I have to say.
I mean, I'm gonna tell you, like, I'm gonna be frank. I'm probably not gonna do that for a couple of reasons. Like, because here's the thing. Like, this ideology that I'm like God, like big God.
No. But like, you're sorry, not to interrupt, but like immediately you're already misinterpreting what I'm saying. Like, I'm not saying like
Stop believing.
I'm not saying you're God, because you don't exist. The self is an illusion. This is why like words, like when I'm trying to explain non-duality, the non-duality of consciousness to people, words are the barrier, but they're actually also the bridge, because I wouldn't be able to like man, I think I'm just gonna be quiet.
But like I've had like an entire change of life. Like I don't swear, I don't watch porn, I don't drink anymore, I don't smoke pot anymore, and it's like I have peace with that. Like not only that, it kind of like I went from like being able to swear up a storm to make a whore blush, and like and watching porn at a point where I don't care, to like where I like if I do something bad, I like legitimately feel bad, and I understand the difference between right and wrong, and it's like, bro, like I just to share like how much my life has changed, like ever since I like came to Christ. It's like I used to hate children. It was really unhealthy, and now I teach Sunday school.
That's awesome.
Like it's like I don't see what, and I might just look into it just to ask you about it later. But like, what change of life? How does this improve one's quality of life? Because I have a couple miracles under my belt. Like I prayed for someone who was starting to go deaf, and when I prayed for his ears, he came back to me like the next week, and he was like, my hearing has never been better. And can you pray for my throat too? Because I have this whole little mucus thing going on, and I haven't talked to him since then. But it's like, I've had little miracles about like feeding people, like, and just delivering people from unclean spirits, and I'm like, I was used as a vessel to like make someone's life like incredibly better, and it's like, and that's what it should be about, like, because
Hey,
God only.
Doug.
What's up?
There's power behind your words. I'm just gonna be straightforward with you, man. I can feel it, and I think you are on the right path, man. All the
I know
power
I'm on the
to
right
you,
path. Like,
I think you're on the right path with regards to the fact that everything that you've described in your experience has helped you. For example, you're no longer suicidal, but I wouldn't say it's the truth. And this isn't me bashing you. This is just my personal opinion, because I'm very interested in religion, objective truth, and like basically the perennial philosophy, and like what people mean, like Eastern philosophy, and what people even mean by God. Sorry, my father has entered the room. I'm going to have to leave.
okay, so I guess I'm wrapping up this podcast. I have to go to work now. It was a pleasure having everybody. It was a pleasure getting to present the things I learned. I hope I did a good job in the efforts of intellectual honesty, presenting stuff at source material without a bias, and presenting stuff without twisting words. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your input and your questions. I learned as much from your questions as I have in you learning the answer. And I will follow up with certain people on certain subjects that have been brought up. I have to go to work now. And thank you.
No, thank you, Doug. Thank you from everybody at the round table, my friend.
Yep. Thank you, Doug.
Machina, if you can get rid of the bot.